I don't know how long I was unconscious. Could have been seconds, could have been hours. But the moment I felt myself detach from my body, it was as if the very essence of my being was lifted out of time. There was no pain, no confusion, just a profound sense of calm that felt alien in the chaos of what had just happened. The crash, the violent screech of metal against metal, the shattering of glass, the explosion of everything familiar, all became a distant memory as I floated above it. My physical body, the one that had been battered, bruised, and broken, seemed so insignificant from this perspective. I was no longer that person. I could see my body below, motionless, and yet I didn't feel the slightest pull of fear or regret. There was no panic, only stillness. As I hovered in this space, I became aware of a presence. It wasn't something I could touch, or even see clearly, but it was there, surrounding me, filling the air, enveloping everything in its embrace. And then, I heard a voice so familiar, so comforting, that it immediately calmed my heart. It wasn't my own thoughts. This was different. This was not just sound. It was truth. "Do not be afraid," the voice said. "You are safe. This is not your end, but the beginning of your transformation." I looked around, trying to place where the voice was coming from, but I could see nothing. Yet, the words felt like they were spoken directly into the very core of my being. The voice, soft, yet filled with authority, continued, "You have been shown the world you have lived in, but there is much more to see. There are truths about your life, your choices, and what lies ahead that you have yet to understand. Are you willing to listen?" I didn't know how to answer, but I knew deep down that this wasn't a choice. Something greater was at play. A part of me, the part that had always felt disconnected from the mundane worries of life, felt deeply compelled to listen, to learn. "I am ready," I whispered, though the words didn't come from my mouth. They were simply a part of the understanding that filled my heart. Suddenly the world around me shifted. It was as though I had been transported to a place where time and space didn't apply. There was light, but not the harsh kind I was familiar with. This light was gentle, warm and peaceful. It didn't hurt my eyes, it only embraced me. As I stood, or perhaps floated, within this immense, radiant space, I saw a figure approach me. At first the figure was a silhouette, its shape bathed in brilliant light, too bright to make out clearly, but as it drew nearer, I saw it more clearly. A man, dressed in simple robes, his face kind, and yet filled with such deep wisdom. His eyes, though, were the most arresting feature. They were filled with love, understanding, and an intensity that seemed to pierce into the very core of my being. I knew who it was before the figure spoke. It was Jesus. He looked at me, and for a moment, I felt as if he saw all of me, the parts I had hidden from others, the parts I had hidden even from myself. Every fault, every weakness, every decision that had led me to this moment, he saw it all. But rather than judgment, I felt overwhelming compassion. He wasn't condemning me. He was looking at me as a father would, with both sorrow and love. "You have not come here by accident," he said, his voice like a melody that resonated in my soul. "But you must learn. The world you have left behind, the world that will continue to exist without you, is a world of deception, a world where many will walk blindly into darkness." His words struck me deeply, but I didn't understand. How could the world be in darkness when it seemed so full of light, so full of progress, so full of promise? "Oh, what do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling, though I didn't know why. "What darkness are you talking about?" He paused for a moment, his gaze soft but steady, and then he began to speak. "The darkness I speak of is not one you can see with your eyes. It is a spiritual blindness, a blindness to the truth. People will be deceived by the promises of convenience, security, and comfort. They will be led to believe that technology is their savior, that through it they will find peace, prosperity, and control over their lives. But in reality, this is a lie. The true peace, the true security, is found only through faith and trust in God." I felt the weight of his words as they sank in, but I still couldn't grasp the full depth of what he was saying. The world I had lived in was one that prized technology, advancement, and the idea that the more we controlled, the better life would be. Was he saying all of this was wrong? How can that be? I asked, my heart heavy with confusion. Isn't technology helping us, making life easier, more connected? Jesus' expression softened even further, but there was a quiet sorrow in his eyes. Technology is not evil, but it can be a tool of great deception if it becomes the source of your trust, he replied. The mark of the beast will come, and it will appear as a solution to all the world's problems. It will promise security, wealth, and peace, but it will take away something far more precious, the soul. I shuddered at the words. The mark of the beast. I had heard of it before, but I hadn't really understood its significance, its true meaning. I had thought of it as some distant future event, something far removed from the present, but now, hearing it from him, I understood it was not just a symbol, it was a real threat to our very spiritual lives. You must prepare, Jesus continued, his voice growing even more serious. You must prepare spiritually and practically, strengthen your faith, build communities of believers, and learn how to live in a way that does not rely on the false promises of the world. In the coming days, many will be deceived. They will choose convenience over truth. But those who stand firm in their faith, who remain connected to God and each other, will find the strength to endure. The weight of his words pressed heavily upon me. But something deep inside me, something I couldn't explain, told me he was right. I wasn't just here to learn. I was here to change, to be transformed. I was here to carry a message, one that would not be easy, but one that would be necessary for the world to hear. As the light around us seemed to grow brighter, I realized that my journey had only just begun. What I had learned in this brief encounter would shape the rest of my life. But there was much more to understand, much more to see. Jesus looked at me with kindness, as though he could see the questions still swirling in my mind. Are you ready to listen, to see the truth that is yet to be revealed? He asked. I nodded, feeling a sense of calm settle over me, a calm that only comes when you know you are about to embark on something that will change you forever. Then let us continue, he said. And together, we moved into the next phase of the journey, one that would uncover truths far beyond what I had ever imagined. Part 2, the revelations begin. As I followed Jesus through the radiant light, the world around me began to shift. The warm embrace of the light faded, and a new, eerie landscape emerged before me. The scene was still bathed in an ethereal glow, but it was now grounded in reality, a vision of the future. I found myself standing in the midst of a bustling city. The streets were crowded with people, all moving with the same mechanical precision, their faces blank and absent of the warmth I once knew. It was as if they were caught in an endless loop of busyness, each one glued to a screen, each one seemingly oblivious to everything else. Where am I? I asked, trying to make sense of the scene. This is one possible future, Jesus replied, his voice calm but filled with a deep, sorrowful understanding. This is a future that will come if the people of the world continue down the path they are on. I looked around at the people, but they didn't seem to notice me. They were too engrossed in their phones or other devices, their eyes locked on screens, their minds seemingly distant from the world around them. They walked with purpose, but it was a purpose dictated by something other than their hearts, by the devices in their hands. Technology, I said softly, more to myself than to Jesus. It's everywhere, it's taking over. Yes, he replied, his tone filled with quiet regret. Technology has become the ruler of many hearts. It has promised convenience, security, and progress, but in reality it is drawing them away from what truly matters: faith, connection, and discernment. The scene around me began to blur, shifting again, as though I was being shown a series of snapshots from different times, different places. I saw cities where people were rushing to get their daily doses of information through their personal devices. They were scanning their wristbands, being identified through facial recognition, and receiving updates in real time about their location, health, and financial status. These people, Jesus said, his voice heavy, believe they are in control, but they are not. They have surrendered their freedom for the illusion of security. They have given in to the system, trusting in convenience instead of God, and they are being led slowly into the trap. I turned to look at him, a growing unease settling in my chest. What trap? What do you mean? Jesus looked at me with deep sorrow in his eyes. The trap is the mark of the beast. It will come, slowly, like a whisper at first. Something small, something convenient. People will be told it's for their benefit, to make life easier, safer. But those who accept it will not realize the consequences until it is too late. The vision shifted again, and now I saw a group of people standing in front of a large high-tech building. They were smiling, their faces illuminated by screens, as they eagerly awaited to be scanned. Some held up their wrists, where the mark was to be placed. Small chips or tattoos that would serve as a key to their identity, their finances, their health, and their future. It looks harmless, I said, my voice laced with confusion. It's just a chip, just a mark. What's wrong with that? Everything, Jesus replied. The mark is not just a physical identifier, it is a spiritual one. When people accept it, they are giving away more than just their personal information. They are giving away their souls. They are severing their connection to God, to the divine guidance that has always been there for them. The mark will strip them of their spiritual freedom and leave them vulnerable to manipulation. I felt my heart race as the weight of his words sank in. But why would they choose this? Why would they willingly accept something so dangerous? Because it will promise everything they long for, he explained. Security, comfort, control. No more hunger, no more pain. A perfect life, a utopia. But all of it is an illusion, a lie. The mark will enslave them, body and soul, and they will not realize it until it is too late. The vision before me shifted again, and now I saw entire cities embracing the mark. It was no longer a choice, it was mandatory. People were lining up to receive their scans, their lives tied to the system in ways they couldn't even fully comprehend. Children, families, even the elderly. Everyone was getting the mark, and it was easy to see why. The promises of a better life were too alluring to resist. Look closer, Jesus urged, his voice gentle yet filled with urgency. See what happens after they accept the mark. I squinted, trying to focus on the scene before me. As the people received their scans, I noticed something strange. Their faces, once filled with joy and hope, began to fade. They seemed drained, hollow. Their eyes, once bright with life, now appeared vacant, as if something important had been stripped away. They moved with a sense of mechanical purpose, no longer free to choose their own path. Do you see? Jesus asked, softly. Their connection to God is severed. They no longer have the ability to choose. Their lives are dictated by the system, and they will be bound to it for eternity. I looked around, horrified, as the people around me walked away, their faces empty. The vision began to fade, and I was left standing in a void, alone, save for Jesus. The mark will come slowly, he said, his voice filled with quiet sorrow. At first, it will be seen as something helpful, even necessary, but in time the consequences will become clear. Those who choose it will find themselves lost, and those who do not will face unimaginable challenges. But do not despair, for I am with you, and I will guide you. I took a deep breath, my mind reeling from the visions I had just witnessed. The weight of it all was crushing, but I couldn't deny the truth in his words. This was the future we were walking into, a future where convenience and security would become the chains that bound us, leading us further and further away from God. I don't understand everything yet, I said, my voice shaking with the enormity of what I had just seen. But I know that I can't be a part of this. You must prepare, Jesus replied. Your journey is not yet over. There is much more you need to see and much more you need to understand. The choices you make now will shape the future. But do not lose hope. There is a way out. There is always a way back. With that, the vision faded, and I found myself standing once more in the bright, peaceful light. But the weight of what I had just learned lingered, settling deep in my soul. What I had seen wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. I was being shown the truth, and now I had to choose. The light around me dimmed, and the familiar glow of Jesus' presence seemed to fade, as the world I was witnessing began to take on a more sinister edge. I felt a shift in the atmosphere, as if the calm, heavenly peace was being replaced by something heavier. The air grew thick, and the once luminous landscape turned shadowed and uncertain. Jesus stood beside me, his presence unwavering as he guided my attention to the unfolding scene before us. The vision had changed again, this time to a world that felt more familiar, yet subtly wrong. The people I saw no longer seemed cold and distant, but warm, welcoming. They appeared happy, even at ease. But there was something about their joy that struck me as unnatural. Why do they look so content? I asked, my voice filled with a mix of curiosity and confusion. They seem so peaceful, so secure. Jesus looked at me with a deep, knowing gaze, and his voice was soft but filled with quiet sorrow. The mark, when it first comes, will not appear as something dangerous. It will seem like a blessing. The world will be told it is the answer to their problems, their suffering, their uncertainties. It will be presented as a gift, a way to make life easier, and many will accept it, believing it is for their good. The scene before me shifted, and I saw billboards plastered on every corner flashing messages about convenience, security, and the promise of a new era of prosperity. People were eagerly flocking to registration booths, where the mark was being applied, seemingly a simple procedure, no different from a routine medical checkup. They smiled as they accepted it, and their trust in the system seemed absolute. "See," Jesus said, pointing to a group of families lining up in front of a digital kiosk. "It is sold as something that will bring ease to their lives. People will be told that this is the only way to ensure their safety, to protect their loved ones. They will be told that without it, they will be left behind, unprotected, vulnerable." I watched as the families went through the process, the children eagerly accepting their marks without question. It was clear that this was no longer a choice, it was an inevitability. People weren't being coerced or threatened directly. Instead, they were made to believe that the mark was a path to something better, something brighter. Why would they believe it? I asked, feeling a growing sense of dread. How could they not see what it really is? "Jesus, let us go," he exclaimed, his voice tender and desperate. "Our cause will not fly into the storm together, brethren," Jesus explained. "The enemy does not come in the form of a roaring lion. No, he comes as an angel of light, something beautiful, something good. And in this case, the mark will be presented as a tool for unity, for peace, for a world where everyone is safe, everyone is connected. It will promise security, prosperity, and peace of mind, which are things people crave, especially in times of uncertainty." Instantly, I could feel my heart heavy with the weight of his words. But what happens to them after they accept it? What's the cost? The Quakers stared at me. "The cost is far greater than they realize," Jesus said. "Those who accept the mark will gradually lose their spiritual freedom. They will no longer be able to discern between what is true and what is false. The mark will tie them to a system that controls every aspect of their lives, how they think, what they believe, and even who they are. It will be a trap that promises everything but delivers nothing but emptiness." I watched as the people, now with the mark, moved through the city like drones. Their smiles were gone, replaced by an unsettling emptiness. Their movements were robotic, their eyes glazed over. They went about their days as if nothing had changed, but there was a hollowness in their eyes, a loss that was impossible to ignore. "They will think they are in control," Jesus said, as if reading my thoughts. "They will think they are free, because the mark will give them everything they need: food, shelter, health, security. It will give them a sense of purpose, even if that purpose is false. But deep within, they will feel the emptiness. They will feel the loss of something precious, something they cannot replace." The vision shifted again, and I saw the face of a man, a father, perhaps, sitting alone in his home. He looked at his wrist, at the small, glowing mark embedded into his skin. His eyes were tired, his brow furrowed as if he could sense something was wrong, but couldn't place what it was. The illusion of peace, of security, began to fade from his face. He was no longer smiling. In fact, his expression had become a mixture of confusion and unease. "Is that how it happens?" I asked, Gradually, little by little? Yes, Jesus said softly. At first, people will not notice. They will feel content, thinking that their lives are better. But then the subtle shift will occur. The connection to God will weaken, the ability to discern the truth will be clouded, and they will begin to feel the emptiness, the growing distance from what is real, what is good. But by then, it will be too late to turn back. I closed my eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of the truth that was being revealed to me. I had always known that technology could be dangerous, but I had never imagined something like this. The gradual, almost imperceptible shift that would lead so many astray. But how do they not see it? I asked, a sense of helplessness creeping into my voice. Why can't they see what they're giving up? The enemy works slowly, subtly, Jesus explained. He knows that if he came all at once, people would resist. So he works in stages, luring them step by step, until they are too far gone to realize what has happened. They will be told that it is for their good, that it is the only way to survive, to thrive, and they will believe it because it will be wrapped in the guise of progress, of peace. I could feel my own heart aching as I watched the people, no, the souls, being drawn into the web of the system. They were not evil, not malicious. They were simply misled, deceived by the promises of a better life, a life that would ultimately rob them of everything that truly mattered. How do we resist? I whispered, barely able to comprehend the enormity of the task ahead. You must be vigilant, Jesus said, his voice filled with unwavering strength. You must remain rooted in faith. The time will come when many will be tested, and their faith will be the only thing that will stand against the tide. But those who remain faithful, those who hold to the truth, will be protected, even in the darkest times. As the vision began to fade and I felt myself being pulled back into the light, I knew that this was just the beginning of the journey. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The mark was not just a choice. It was a test. Of faith, of discernment, of devotion. And it was one that would challenge the hearts and minds of every person on earth. I had seen the subtlety of the deception. Now, I had to prepare. The challenge was not only to resist the mark, but to help others see the truth before it was too late. The light around us grew warmer, almost comforting, as Jesus turned to face me once more. The weight of the revelations I had witnessed still lingered in my heart, a quiet but pressing urgency that had taken root deep within me. The world I had seen, the one where people unknowingly embraced the mark, was not one I could forget. But as I stood there, overwhelmed by the vision, Jesus spoke again, his voice calm, yet filled with a sense of purpose. You have seen the danger, he began, his gaze steady and piercing. You have witnessed the subtle deception that will take root in the hearts of many. But you must understand this. The journey does not end with the knowledge of what is to come. It begins there. I looked at him, my mind racing, trying to understand. What was he asking of me? I had learned so much, and yet, it felt like the weight of the task ahead was becoming heavier by the moment. But Jesus was not discouraging me. There was no fear in his words, only a call to action, quiet, clear, and resolute. How can I help? I asked, my voice betraying the uncertainty that lingered. What can I do in the face of all this? It seems so overwhelming. You must start with yourself, he replied, his voice gentle but unwavering. You must build your own spiritual foundation first. When the time comes, you will not be able to stand firm if you are not rooted in faith, in love, in trust in the divine. Your spirit must be prepared, your heart strong, and your mind clear. Only then can you help others do the same. I nodded slowly, taking in his words. There was truth in them. How could I help others if I did not first know how to stand firm myself? The world I had seen was a reflection of what could happen if people lost their sense of direction, if they lost their faith in something greater than themselves. Jesus continued, your spiritual growth is essential, but you must also be prepared practically. The world will become uncertain, and those who rely only on the systems of society will be unprepared for the challenges ahead. You must learn to be self-sufficient, to rely on the skills and knowledge that will help sustain you in the face of adversity. Food, water, shelter, these things will become more precious than gold, but above all, your community will be your strength. A sense of clarity began to unfold within me. Faith alone would not sustain me, I needed to ground myself in practical knowledge and prepare my life to withstand the coming challenges. But there was something deeper, something even more important: community. Jesus seemed to sense my thoughts, and he smiled softly. "You are not alone in this. You will need others. Together you will form a network of strength and support. Do not isolate yourself in your preparation. Build bonds, form relationships with those who share the same values, the same commitment to truth. For when the time comes, it will be those bonds that will hold you together." So I thought about the world I had witnessed, the one where people stood in line, accepting the mark without question, drawn into a system that controlled their every move. It was a world devoid of genuine connection, where people were disconnected not only from the truth but from each other. But in the community Jesus spoke of, there would be no such disconnection. It would be a network of support, of love, and of shared purpose. We would help each other to prepare, to grow, to withstand the challenges ahead. "The key is to find those who have the eyes to see the truth," Jesus continued. "The world will be full of distractions, of lies, but there will always be those who will recognize the call. And you, too, will need to share what you know, what you have seen. Your story, your experience, can serve as a beacon of light in the darkness." I felt a stirring in my heart, a desire to spread the message I had received. The lessons were not just for me, they were meant to be shared. It wasn't enough to merely prepare myself. I had a responsibility to help others see what was coming, to guide them through the storm, just as I had been guided. Jesus looked at me with deep compassion, his eyes full of love and understanding. "You must teach them, not only the ways of faith, but also the importance of practical skills. Show them how to live without relying solely on the systems of the world. Help them to become self-sufficient, to build a foundation of trust, and to strengthen their relationships with each other. Help them to grow spiritually, yes, but also to prepare for the physical trials ahead." I felt a sense of conviction grow within me, as if a new purpose was beginning to take root in my soul. The lessons I had learned were too important to keep to myself. They had to be shared. But it wasn't just about preaching or lecturing. It was about living these truths, embodying them in every aspect of life. I had to lead by example. "But how do I start?" I asked, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "Where do I begin?" Jesus gave me a look that conveyed both encouragement and assurance. "Start where you are. Begin with small steps. Work on your own faith, your own preparation. Then, as you are ready, share what you know with those around you. Encourage them to build their own spiritual foundation and practical readiness. Help them to see the importance of community, of mutual support. Every step you take will make a difference." The vision began to fade once more, but I could still feel his presence, still hear his voice echoing in my mind, filling me with both peace and urgency. "You are not alone in this journey," he reminded me softly. "There will be challenges, yes, but there will also be hope, faith, and strength that comes from being prepared, both spiritually and practically. And through it all, I will be with you. I will guide you, as long as you remain faithful, as long as you stay true to the path." As the vision faded, I stood still, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. I had been given a mission, one that was daunting but also filled with purpose. It was not just about survival. It was about helping others to survive, to thrive in the face of trials. It was about preparing for what was to come, building a foundation of faith, and gathering together those who would stand firm, no matter what the world tried to offer. The journey was only just beginning, and there was still so much to do, but for the first time since I had experienced that fateful moment of near death, I felt a clear sense of direction. I was no longer in the dark about the future, and with each step I took, I would bring others along with me. The light that had surrounded me for what felt like an eternity now began to soften, fading gently as if the world itself were pulling away. My heart, though full, had begun to grasp the weight of everything I had learned. I had witnessed the coming trials, the subtle deceptions, the dangers of the mark, the fragile nature of human faith in the face of overwhelming odds, and I had been called to prepare, to build a foundation of both spiritual strength and practical resilience. But now, as the warmth of that divine presence began to recede, there was one final message I had yet to receive. Jesus stood before me again, his expression serene but firm. There was a calmness in his eyes, a depth of understanding that transcended everything I had just experienced. It was as if, in those moments, he had shown me the entire path, from the darkest depths of human despair to the brightest light of redemption. Yet, there was still more to be said. "You have seen the world as it will be," he began, his voice steady, filled with compassion. "You have witnessed the chaos, the fear, and the suffering that will come when people turn away from the truth, when they are swayed by false promises of security and convenience. But you must understand this. Though the world will grow darker, it will not remain so forever. There is always the possibility of revival, of hope, and of salvation." His words struck deep, reverberating through the very core of my being. I had witnessed the decline, the acceptance of the mark, the gradual erosion of faith. But now, in this moment, I was hearing something different, a message of hope, a message that, despite all the darkness, there was always the potential for light to break through. "Do not lose heart," Jesus continued, his gaze unwavering. "Though many will falter, though many will succumb to the lies, there will always be a remnant, a faithful few, who will hold fast to the truth, to the light that shines within them. And as long as they remain steadfast, there is always the possibility for revival, for renewal." I felt my heart stir with a quiet sense of relief, as if the weight I had carried in my chest was lifting. There was still hope, there was still a chance. I could feel it in the very air around me, a promise that, no matter how dark the road ahead might be, there would always be those who would rise up in faith. Jesus smiled gently, reading the unspoken thoughts in my heart. "It is in the darkest of times that the light shines the brightest. Remember this. The trials you will face will refine you. The challenges will not break you if you remain rooted in love, in faith, and in truth. And as you face these trials, you will become a beacon for others, guiding them back to the light." His words were a balm to my soul, soothing the fears that had taken root within me. I had seen the suffering, the struggles of a world bent on following its own desires, but now I understood. It was not the end. It was merely the beginning of something greater, and as much as I had felt the urgency of the preparations I needed to make, I now realized that there was something even more powerful than the coming trials, the possibility of salvation. "Lord Buntana, the revival you seek," he said softly, "begins with you. It begins with your own heart, your own commitment to stay true to the path of righteousness. You must carry this message of hope, of faith into the world, not with force or condemnation, but with love, with gentleness. For those who are lost, who have turned away, it is love that will bring them back, not fear, not anger, though the love that you have received from me, that you must now share." The weight of those words settled on my heart, and I knew in that moment what I had to do. The world was in turmoil, but there was hope. There was always hope. It would not be easy, and the road would not always be clear, but it was not for me to walk alone. I was part of something greater, a community of souls bound together by faith and love, and through us, the world could be healed. "You will return to the world now," Jesus continued, his voice a quiet whisper that seemed to echo in the vastness of the space around us. "But remember this. As you go, you carry within you the seed of revival. No matter how much darkness you face, the light you hold will never be extinguished unless you allow it. Nurture it, protect it, and let it grow. Share it with others, for in the end it is love and faith that will overcome all." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settling into my spirit. I knew my journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, of fear. But I also knew that I had been given something irreplaceable, a renewed sense of purpose, a mission that transcended the immediate trials, a mission to bring hope, faith, and love to those who were lost. As Jesus stepped back, the light around me grew brighter once again, and I felt myself drawn toward it, pulled by an invisible force. The world I had left behind, the life I had once known, began to fade into the distance. But as I was drawn back, something within me was changing. I was returning, not as the person I had been, but as someone who had been touched by something far greater than themselves. I was not the same. And as I slowly began to open my eyes, returning to my physical form, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: my mission had just begun. The journey ahead would be long, and there would be moments when it seemed easier to give up, to lose hope. But no matter what came, I carried within me the knowledge that there was always the possibility of revival, that the light would always shine through the darkness, and with that light, I would carry the message of love, of hope, of faith, and of salvation to the world. The darkness was not the end, it was merely the beginning, and as long as I had faith, I knew I would never walk in darkness alone.